In the early 1700s, no one had ever heard of a dinosaur. The idea of giant prehistoric reptiles roaming Earth was not only unknown, it was unthinkable. People dug up massive bones and thought they belonged to dragons, giants, or even biblical creatures. One day in 1677, an English naturalist named Robert Plot discovered a large fossilized bone in Oxfordshire. It was thick, heavy, and nothing like a human's. He believed it came from a giant man who had once walked the earth, perhaps from ancient myths. He published a drawing of it, but the mystery remained. Throughout Europe, similar discoveries followed. Bones too large for any known animal emerged from rock layers, baffling farmers, miners, and even scholars. Yet science at the time had no framework to explain them. No one had connected the dots. There was no concept of deep time, no evolutionary theory, and certainly no understanding of extinct species. The bones were dismissed as curiosities, interesting, but irrelevant. But all of that was about to change. What if these strange fossils weren't mythical or symbolic, but real remains of creatures that once dominated the planet? The question lingered in the air, waiting for the right mind to challenge centuries of belief. The silence before a revolution. Before the word dinosaur existed, fossils were just puzzles without a picture. They were relics from a forgotten world, yet no one knew what they represented. In the early 1800s, two fossils would change everything. One was a tooth sharp curved and clearly from a predator. The other was a set of large, herbivorous teeth that resembled an iguana's, but far larger. These fossils would later become known as Megalosaurus and Iguanodon. But at the time, no one fully understood what they were dealing with. People proposed all sorts of ideas: giant lizards, biblical monsters, even creatures that had survived Noah's flood. Science was slowly evolving, and so was human curiosity. The early 19th century saw a shift in how people thought about Earth's past. Fossils were no longer seen as freak accidents or divine signs. They became evidence. Evidence that the world was far older and far stranger than anyone had dared to imagine. Without the framework of evolution or extinction, these interpretations were fragmented. But the seeds had been planted. Somewhere beneath layers of rock and misunderstanding, the story of the dinosaurs was taking shape. The pieces were scattered, but the image was slowly becoming clear. In 1824, William Buckland stood before the Geological Society of London and presented something no one had ever heard before: the scientific description of a giant prehistoric carnivore. He named it Megalosaurus, meaning great lizard. For the first time, a fossilized creature from an unknown age was classified, measured, and treated as part of Earth's history. Buckland wasn't a wild dreamer. He was a respected geologist and clergyman. He had spent years collecting fossil fragments, studying geology, and trying to reconcile the ancient Earth with biblical teachings. His paper on Megalosaurus was cautious but groundbreaking. It laid the foundation for what we now call dinosaur science. Yet Buckland never used the term dinosaur. That word didn't exist yet. What he did was give legitimacy to the idea that these massive extinct animals once roamed the earth. He didn't know exactly what they looked like, how they moved, or when they lived, but he opened the door. He believed in a world of catastrophes and divine events, but still managed to build a bridge to modern science. Without Buckland's formal work, dinosaurs might have remained scattered bones and wild theories. His courage turned fossils into facts. While Buckland worked in academia, Gideon Mantell was a country doctor with a passion for fossils. In 1822, his wife, Mary Ann, discovered a strange tooth embedded in a rock near Sussex. It looked like an iguana's, but it was enormous. Mantell was fascinated. He collected more fragments, bones, teeth, and even claws, and began assembling the story of a giant herbivore from Earth's past. The scientific community, however, was skeptical. Many dismissed his ideas as amateur fantasy. Some ridiculed him, others ignored him. But Mantell persisted. He named his discovery Iguanodon, meaning Iguanotooth, and published his findings. Though his reconstructions were flawed, he once thought the thumb spike was a horn. His instincts were right. Iguanodon was a dinosaur, one of the first ever identified. Mantell's work was lonely, poorly funded, and often ridiculed, but it laid the groundwork for future discoveries. He wasn't just chasing bones, he was chasing truth. In time, even his harshest critics had to admit he was onto something extraordinary. Mantell didn't receive the fame he deserved during his lifetime, but without him, our understanding of dinosaurs would be years behind. His tooth wasn't just a fossil, it was a turning point in science, a truth carved in stone. In 1842, a brilliant and ambitious anatomist named Richard Owen changed everything. Drawing on the work of Buckland, Mantell, and others, he coined a new term, Dinosauria, meaning terrible lizards. Owen realized that Megalosaurus, Iguanodon, and Hylaeosaurus shared key traits. They were reptiles, but unlike any alive today. They had fused hip bones, upright limbs, and massive size. They were a distinct group, deserving their own category in the tree of life. Owen's move was more than scientific. It was strategic. He wanted to be the face of this new science. He had the connections, the confidence, and the charisma to make dinosaurs famous. And it worked. Owen's name became linked with the discovery of dinosaurs in the public's mind, even though he hadn't unearthed any himself. His status grew, and so did the field of paleontology. Museums began displaying dinosaur skeletons. Newspapers wrote about these terrible lizards. The Victorian public was captivated. Yet, in claiming the spotlight, Owen also cast a shadow. He downplayed the contributions of Buckland and especially Mantell. History began to forget the real pioneers, those who had done the dirty work, piecing together giants from fragments. Owen gave dinosaurs their name, but not their soul. The branding was his, but the bones belonged to others. Behind the polished museums and academic papers was a bitter personal feud. Richard Owen and Gideon Mantell were not friends, or they were rivals. Owen, with his powerful connections and institutional backing, sought credit for discoveries Mantell had spent years compiling. As Owen's fame grew, he systematically downplayed Mantell's role in dinosaur science. He even reclassified some of Mantell's fossils under his own terms, presenting them as his interpretations. Mantell, already suffering from health problems and financial strain, watched as his life's work was overshadowed. He continued to write and research despite constant pain, even dictating notes from bed. In 1852, he died quietly, mostly forgotten by the scientific establishment. Owen, meanwhile, rose to fame as the founding director of London's Natural History Museum. The narrative was clear. Owen, the genius behind Dinosauria, stood alone. But that wasn't the full truth. Mantell had done much of the groundwork. He had found, studied, and even named key dinosaur fossils. Owen may have been the better politician, but Mantell was the true explorer. Their rivalry wasn't just personal, it shaped the entire story of how dinosaurs were introduced to the world. Fame is fleeting, but the fossils remain. While men like Buckland, Mantell, and Owen took center stage, some of the most important early fossil discoveries came from someone else entirely, Mary Anning. In the early 1800s, she walked the cliffs of Lyme Regis, collecting strange skeletons embedded in stone. She found creatures unlike anything in textbooks: Plesiosaurus, Ichthyosaurus, even the first British pterosaur. Though not dinosaurs, her discoveries laid the foundation for understanding prehistoric life. Anning was self-taught, female, and working class, a combination the scientific world of the 19th century often ignored. Her letters were cited, her fossils sold to museums, but her name rarely appeared in scientific papers. Other women followed in her footsteps, collectors, illustrators, even fossil preparators, but they were usually excluded from credit. The story of dinosaurs is not just about bones, it's about who gets remembered. And for too long, women were erased from that story. As we look back at the origins of dinosaur science, it becomes clear the history we were told is incomplete. Anning and others were silent architects of the fossil revolution. Their hands dug the stones, their eyes spotted the truth. But history written by men like Owen left them out until now. They helped build paleontology with no statues, only stones. So why does the name Richard Owen echo through history while Buckland, Mantell, and Anning fade into the background? The answer lies in power. Owen was a master of self-promotion. He had access to royal circles, controlled museum narratives, and edited scientific journals. He knew how to make his version of history stick. When the Natural History Museum opened in London, it was Owen's vision that shaped the halls. He curated the exhibits, wrote the descriptions, and made sure the dinosaur displays carried his legacy. Meanwhile, Buckland's work was tied too closely to theology, which fell out of favor in academic circles. Mantell died before his contributions could be celebrated, and Anning was never officially recognized in her lifetime. Owen's narrative became the official one, repeated in textbooks, lectures, and museum tours for over a century. He wasn't just a scientist, he was a storyteller, and he knew how to control the script. But the truth is more complex. Science isn't built by one person, it's a mosaic. And while Owen gave dinosaurs their name, he didn't make the first discovery. The question we must ask now is, are we ready to rewrite that story? Or will silence fossilize injustice? Despite the controversies, the fossils themselves stood as undeniable evidence of a lost world. Megalosaurus, Iguanodon, and Hylaeosaurus were just the beginning. These fragmented skeletons, once scattered across muddy fields and chalk cliffs, now filled museum halls. Each fossil told a piece of a greater story. Scientists began realizing that dinosaurs weren't mythical monsters, but real animals that once ruled Earth. They walked on land, fought fed, and eventually died out in mysterious ways. The bones became symbols of Earth's deep history of extinction, evolution, and time beyond human memory. As more fossils were uncovered in Europe, then North America, a new science emerged, paleontology. It was no longer a gentleman's hobby, but a full scientific discipline. Fossils were cataloged, classified, reconstructed, and displayed. School children learned the names. Artists imagined entire prehistoric worlds. Museums turned into time machines. And it all began with a few forgotten people who dared to believe these bones had meaning. The legacy of those early fossils lives on not just in glass cases, but in the very way we understand life's timeline. Dinosaurs connect us to a world we never knew and a future still unfolding. Now we return to the central question: who was the first to discover dinosaurs? Was it Robert Plot, who saw a mysterious bone and documented it centuries ago? Was it William Buckland, who gave Megalosaurus its scientific identity? Or Gideon Mantell, who uncovered the Iguanodon and fought for recognition? Maybe it was Richard Owen, who gave the creatures their name and introduced them to the world stage. Or perhaps Mary Anning, whose fossils transformed our understanding of prehistoric life, even if they weren't dinosaurs in the strictest sense. The truth is, there's no single answer. Like all great stories, the discovery of dinosaurs is not about one hero, but many. It's a tapestry woven from ambition, rivalry, brilliance, and injustice. Some names were celebrated, others were erased, but the bones never lied. They waited patiently for anyone to listen. And when people finally did, they changed our place in the universe forever. Dinosaurs remind us of how much we don't know, and how curiosity can outlive even the greatest empires. So who truly discovered dinosaurs? That's for you to decide. But one thing is certain, the story isn't over. It's still being written bone by bone, name by name. Dinosaurs are no longer just bones in museums. They're symbols of lost worlds, forgotten stories, and rediscovered truths. Each fossil is a whisper from the past, asking us to listen more closely. As new discoveries continue to emerge from the ground, perhaps the real question isn't who discovered dinosaurs first, but who will help us understand them best in the future. The next chapter is yours to write.